My name is Marlene Hewitt. I am a member of Business and Professional Women's Organization and the Vice President as well as the Crisis Center Coordinator for that organization. BPW's mandate is the status of women. Barbados, for us, we think of women's equality, social justice, and women's empowerment. We're 55 years this year, and we've been involved in legislation. I recall early on in Barbados history, women that were foreign-born couldn't get citizenship, but men who were foreign-born could get citizenship. And that was one of our first forays into the legislative areas. We lobbied, we wrote letters, we did everything, and finally it was changed. And so from then on, we've been sitting on committees, dealing with family matters, bringing in the domestic violence legislation. We would have seen the Bureau of Women's Affairs at the time, and then the Bureau of Gender Affairs. So we were in that area. We had the first ever international fair. We also had the first career showcase in Barbados. And from that, we talked to the government and tried to get them to understand that in the schools, they needed someone who could talk to the students, listen to them, give them guidance, and that's how guidance counselors first came in. We played a vast role in that area. So we've been working in all aspects, health, any area that affects women. Actually, we tried to get more women in Parliament, more women to run. At one time, we even paid for all the women their registration. It didn't matter which party they were from. So a wide range, everything. In 1986, there were a series of rapes around the UWI, and the organization got together and discussed what we could do about it. And we, at the time, there was a lady in Albany who was involved in crisis centers. And so she came down to Barbados and we met and we came up with a hotline, a crisis hotline. We called it a rape crisis hotline then, and it ran 12 hours a day. But then we started getting so many calls about domestic violence, calls about rape, sexual assault. So we decided to change the name of the hotline and call it a crisis center hotline, and also a crisis center. We were looking into the future and hoping that we would have a place where we could have people come in and have face-to-face discussions, which eventually we did. So that's how we started our crisis center hotline in 1986. And the phone was placed at one person resident, and we would transfer the phones to different counselors. And we had our first training for counselors. So that's how it came about. And we progressed till we had a room at one time at the family planning where we would do face-to-face, we would do group counseling, etc. But we lost that room, so we are looking for a place again. After we had the crisis center hotline going and we kept getting calls, we realized that we were helping women in terms of giving them counseling, etc. But there were women we realized who had to get out of that situation and we had nowhere to put them. So we asked friends of ours first and we started to house them in private houses. But we knew that couldn't continue. We were putting the owners also at risk. Some were members and some were friends of ours. So we started to talk to the government. It took us a few years to convince the government that Barbados really needed a safe house. And in 1999, the government said yes. They gave us a building and we launched the shelter. Since we've had the shelter open, we have never, ever been empty, never. We always have women and their children there. We take all children. We've had, I think, at the maximum, maybe 10 with the mother. Sometimes we have 7, sometimes 1. We also have women who are pregnant. So we have, right, and also we have women from overseas. We've had women from many countries, not just in the region, internationally. Last few years, we had some issues with resources. So we take women who are more or less are running for their lives. That's how we term it. They must get out of that household, them or their children. So we will then talk to them, do an assessment, and move them into the shelter if it is necessary. If it's not necessary, they may continue to have counseling on the hotline, or we may even refer them to some other counselors or to lawyers, etc. But once we say, yes, you can come in, now we work through family conflict unit. Before family conflict unit, we'd ask the police, just general police, to collect them, or sometimes we would collect them ourselves, given certain circumstances, because we don't want to put the staff or our members at risk either. So they come in, they're allowed to stay for 3 months. We have had women stay much longer, but those are special cases where the injuries are so great that it takes a long time for them to recover, or they have no way to go when they leave, and we're working with them to get, or sometimes we work with other shelters or crisis centers in other countries in the region for them to move directly from our shelter to another shelter in another country. Sometimes we have to do that as well.
Okay. What's your max? What's your capacity?
Our capacity is supposed to be 25, but we don't have any max.
Okay.
Whoever comes, we take them.
Okay.
Generally, the ladies are in, we call them suites. So they have their own little kitchen facility, their little sofa, etc., their room, their bedroom. But if it is necessary and we have to put 2 families, we will do that just to make sure that no one is turned away. They get counseling. Definitely, they have to come to counseling in domestic violence. They come for life skills. Children. Sometimes we have counselors, psychologists in, child psychologists for the children as well. If they don't have a job, we work with them in terms of the skills. How do you interview? How do you dress? If they say they want to be an entrepreneur, we may bring in people from, I think it's called Barbados Export now, to come in to discuss with them. We also would teach them how to do basic things. Maybe they want to do baking, etc., and then they can move on. I think Udemy, we allow them to do classes on the computer, Udemy, so that they can get some skills. Or if they identify a particular class in Barbados, well, before COVID that they wanted to attend, we would allow them to go. We would send them to the classes. So we do a lot of building in order for them to be able to move on once they leave us. The main impact was in terms of our assessments. Normally, we would do verbal assessments, but because now with people having COVID, you're not sure. So the staff then had to go out to see the individual, talk to them, and get some measure of if they're exposed or not exposed. So that was a big impact, they said, for the staff. Having to go out, and then they're exposing themselves. And then the clients that are coming in also may be exposing the clients that are already in the shelter and the staff had said. So that whole juggling, that process was an issue. The other one was transportation. As I told you, we would get the family conflict unit mainly to arrange to bring in the clients, but at one time the police were not allowed to put people in the vehicles. So that was created a problem for us because we don't have our own vehicle, and to get transportation is very expensive for us to provide transportation to bring clients in. So that was an issue, and then that eased up a bit, but then family conflict had their own health challenges. So right now it's not back to where it used to be, but it has begun to, they've begun to bring back in clients for us. We still had calls on our hotline, but what we found was we weren't getting an increased calls in terms of what I call intimate partner violence. We were getting calls mainly for homelessness and family violence, or situational violence as they call it. So grandmother and grandson, daughter and father, cousins, siblings. I think because everybody was confined, but we didn't see, and we went back a number of years to make sure that we were comparing the numbers that were coming in and the calls we were getting to the other years, and we didn't see an increase. We spoke to Family Conflict to ask them if they had gotten more calls, and they said no. We also spoke to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital because we get calls from them, and they said no, they hadn't seen an increase in intimate partner violence, but it was more family violence. And a lot of calls for women who were homeless or becoming homeless. I think we need to definitely don't only think of intimate partner violence. We definitely have to start thinking of family violence and the other ways of gender-based violence. I've noticed in a newspaper recently, there were a lot of cases in terms of rape and sexual assault, and also of minors. So I think we have to also pay more attention to that, make people more aware of what they can do, the necessity of reporting it. Right now, there's also a case that has gone to the CCJ in terms of the law and can a man be raped. So we have to pay attention to these things. I'm hoping that it will, and that the law is gender neutral. I think it is, but hopefully now we will be able to concrete the law that men can also report rape or sexual assault by other men. And so awareness, prevention, definitely we have to do more in schools. After our resources went down, we weren't doing as much in schools as we used to. We used to go, we found that when we took certain calypsonians and music and so forth, we got over the message much easier and we actually had a team program that we carried to a lot of schools, and we would involve things like mediation. But we hope to get back there if we can get more members. We don't have enough hands to do that and all the other things that we've been doing. So those are some of the areas that we definitely need to look at. Yesterday, the moderator, a young lady, I think she's new, VOB, she was talking about a case she was talking about how the media reported a particular case, and it was more the titillation than the actual what happened to the victim. That's another area that we need to pressure the media on. Do some research. Know what it's all about. When you come to report, don't re-victimize the victim. Write it in a way that says what happened, and if there's an issue to be raised, raise it. But forget that sauciness, no, you don't want to do that.